A lot of that was experiencing being on the outskirts of the whirling vacuum, which is current politics, really. When you get to the centre, or you start to sort of see the centre, and you know, like a tornado, there's just basically nothing there. And Myxomatosis was really sort of born out of that, born out of this idea, like, well, again, I guess like Punch Up as well. It's like, well, I was there, and no, it wasn't. It wasn't like that. I was there, and it wasn't like that. But yet, I must be ill, because what I saw and what was reported was a totally different thing. Very specifically provoked by something that happened a few years ago, and a Drop the Debt thing that just stuck with me when we went to Cologne. And I mean, I've talked about this before, but how all these nice old ladies, you know, and Quakers and stuff, and were all there protesting that the G7 or 8, I can never remember who they've dumped off last. We handed in this petition for millions of signatures or whatever to Schroeder at this thing in Cologne, and there was a small riot. There's a protest that turned into a riot back in London. Reclaim the Streets were involved in, although I'm quite sure they weren't involved with the rioting. But somehow the British press, obviously the Murdoch papers in particular, because they love this sort of shit, were just writing it up as all these old ladies and all these, you know, nice Quakers were somehow anti-capitalist lunatics, and it was all part of the same coordinated protest, which was just nonsense, you know. And the whole thing was just written up so badly, and everyone was ignoring the fact that actually there was actually millions of people's fixed signatures on this thing that we'd, you know, it was, I don't know, it just sort of stuck with me how utterly powerless people are to really represent what goes on if other people elsewhere see fit. If they see a nicer, more convenient story to be written another way, they can write off the wishes of millions of people in a split-second editorial decision, which I feel is immoral. You know, it's immoral, you know, in a lot of different situations. But I always go on about this, and I always, you know, people just cut it out because they think, well, the editor's not going to take that. He's going to cut that out anyway. So I don't even know why I bother.
That's all playing around with the idea of how keyboards used to be, used to sound frightening, and be and Tube Army style, I suppose, all slightly out of tune and queasy making and
combinations of sounds.
Yeah,
played in real time, like keyboards played in real time.
Yeah, it was that old-fashioned. You sort of forget that presumably in the 80s, when keyboards were being recorded, people would be playing them, and even if a band just had keyboards in it, they'd have to one at a time play keyboards onto tape, and which is a really alien concept because of computers and sequencing and how music is made today. And so that was done like that, wasn't it? Pretty much.
Well, it was a tricky one because it was the version that Tom did on it. He demoed it. It was really sort of, it was very digital. It was really great, but it was a bit of a different beast in a way. It was, and we wanted to incorporate the live thing, and the Tubeway Army thing was the perfect thing to do. But we had to find an approach to it, and we didn't quite get it in LA, but we eventually got to loop Phil's drums, and then we did a sort of a live rough in the control room, and then other stuff was added, and it's good. It's that whole don't know. It's that totally playing something in the spirit of how you think they might have made records in 79, 80 or whatever. And
it was one of those occasions where you're recording and the element that you think is the key to the song, the rhythm, actually isn't, and it's in the detail. It's in just the single keyboard lines. And as soon as they became overpowering and took over the song started working, and the rhythm was just a way to lead you through the song, but it wasn't the feature anymore. And suddenly it had this atmosphere attached to it, which is why it works, why it's on the record, really.
my absolute favourite type of weather is force 10 gale. Like that's the happiest I am. Is in sort of gale that might just take you up in the air and never come down again. You know that and it was sort of I mean whatever came out lyrically, it was actually supposed to be a sort of celebration of this sort of storm, which is that, you know, that sort of, you know, I thrive on that. You know, I'm singing about a wild storm, but yet the music is very, very soft, you know, and reassuring, like you're listening to it from outside the window. It's a sort of a really lonely song as well. The loneliest song on the record, I think.
It's very simple and sort of quite pretty, but there's something about the music for me, the chords for me, where it never quite resolves. It never really grounds or something. It never grounds itself. So it just sounds like it's always about to resolve, and in a way it never does. Which makes it quite floaty and.
But in terms of the instruments
gentle.
that played, that it gives it that warmth, you know, you're right.
Yeah.
And that's that. I always thought that it's kind of reminds me a bit of. I always thought it was like Stevie Wonder, sort of that talking book era, when it's that kind of, you get that warmth, and what he's doing a lot of the time melodically, he doesn't resolve stuff. He does these beautiful chords, and then they just and it's all wrapped up in the warmth of the recording and his great voice, but sometimes it just doesn't resolve, which is brilliant, why it's so different. And I think it's like, always thought this was a sort of a Sunday morning song, really. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's a Radiohead Sunday morning, which is, you know, copy of the of the paper and the news.
With some bad news on the front.
Bad news on the front, yeah.
It was quite weird. That song's been kicking around for a while, and I'd not really thought about how violent the images were for ages until we came to trying to put the record together, working out where it went, and I was also typing up the words for Stanley, and I suddenly like, wow, I mean, this is pretty bitter stuff, you know, all the stuff about cold wives and mistresses, cold wives and Sunday papers, city boys and first class, all that sort of stuff. It's like, bloody hell, it's pretty serious. I mean, it was, I guess, it's just very, very angry, because I couldn't help it, really. It's a good place to put anger is in music, you know, I think, better than a lot of other places. But again, the crazy thing about it is I'm only able to put the anger in that song is because the melody itself is so sweet, you know. And that's Johnny's. You know, Johnny wrote this really sweet guitar melody, and it just didn't. The where the words came from was that's just where they came from. I mean, it wasn't. I wasn't really. I wasn't even thinking that I was angry. I mean, I was just feeling like I was going a bit mad. That's all. But I'm used to that now. I go through phases like that, but that was a particularly bad one. But you know, we were kind of reluctant to put it on the record for ages, because it was just so. We end every record with the nice sort of. It's ending. Oh, how nice, you know, sort of ending. But really, this wasn't the whole atmosphere, and where this whole record comes from is not that. It would have been false. It would have been false to do that, because you know, I sort of think it's of all the record is very much there's lots of sort of fairy tale children's story things going on in it, and then that one at the end again is obviously the wolf at the door and so on, but it's as you say, kind of the most sort of ordinary life, realistic of place in the whole record, and it's sort of like waking you up at the end, really, and waking you up to something that's really not that pleasant, rather than waking you up and it's like, oh, it's all been a lovely dream. it's all been a nightmare and you need to go and get a glass of water now. That's kind of what it is.